Hola, bienvenidos de nuevo a la clase de Español 101 aquí en Carlos de San Marcos. Soy su profesor, Dr. Michael Hughes, y hoy estamos hablando de los varios usos del verbo ser. Hello, welcome back to Spanish 101 here at Cal State San Marcos. I'm your professor, Dr. Michael Hughes, and today we're looking at the multiple uses of the verb ser, to be. Right, so this is your basic paradigm for the verb ser. Este es el paradigma del verbo ser. Paradigm or paradigma, right? So in English, paradigm, not paradigm. Paradigm means example or set of examples, right? So in linguistics or in grammar, the paradigm for a particular verb is all of the forms of that verb. And in Spanish, right? Spanish has a future, a past, a present. It has a much bigger paradigm for any given verb, but this is the present tense set of forms that you need to learn for the verb ser. Ser, ser, ser. Yo soy, tú eres, usted es, él es, ella es, nosotros somos, ustedes son, ellos son, ellas son, right? And by now you've probably noticed that ustedes, ellos, ellas are always going to have the same form. Right, so one more time, leaving the pronouns out. Soy, eres, es, somos, son. Those are our verb forms. So verb ser usually is translated as English be, and it's close. It's the one. It's of the two, right? You know that there's two in Spanish, or if you don't know, you know. There's ser and there's estar. Ser is probably the closest one to English is or be, but they kind of overlap in their semantic space. So estar typically is used for location and for mental, emotional, and physical states. And then ser usually expresses inherent properties of things, not necessarily permanent things, right? So you can express permanent things using estar and impermanent things using ser. For instance, because estar is used for physical states, you would have to say él está muerto, means he is dead, but that's clearly, at least as far as we're aware, a permanent state, right? Something permanent. We're not going to use ser. Likewise, you can say yo soy estudiante, but hopefully, right, you will only be a student for a limited amount of time. You're going to graduate and move on to a career or whatever else is in store for you in your future, right? So permanence isn't necessarily a thing, but inherent properties, right? And if you're a student, you can be defined as a student. And if you're happy, right, at the moment, you wouldn't be defined as happy, just as right as a happy person, but you're in a current state of happiness. Okay, but the point here is ser. So we'll get to a star later. Don't worry about it. Let's just focus on ser today, right? So professions use ser. So whatever you are, right? Ellas son estudiantes. Él es profesor de lenguas. Él es el papa. Él es rey de España. Ella es la reina. Son los reyes, bueno, de España. Right. So again, it's just saying that's an inherent characteristic of who you are, the profession. Again, it's not necessarily permanent, right? You're not going to be a student. The Pope isn't always going to be the Pope. I mean, he'll be dead before he's not, probably, but not necessarily these days. And then just a quick word on the word papa. Esta es la papa, right? La papa. And that's the potato, right? Everybody's favorite thing. In some places it's called batata, but it's la papa or patata in other places, right? But most places in the Spanish-speaking world, la papa. No accent mark, la papa, right? This is the Pope, and he's el papa, right? Not father, right? So el papa. So the stress is still on the second to last syllable, el papa. And then Homer here is el papa, right? And we need to have that accent mark because it's telling us that the stress is on the final syllable. In most Spanish words, if the word ends in a vowel, the stress is on the second and last syllable. Like el papa, we don't need to have an accent mark here. It's shifted stress, so that accent mark tells us el papa, right? So la papa, el papa, y el papá. Y los papás, right? You might hear people say, oh, mis papás, and they're talking about their parents, right? Just like los padres is also the word for parents, right? And this is, of course, la mamá. Again, with the accent on the a. Okay. Sorry for that. Right, nacionalidad también, right? So nacionalidad, nationality, right? Again, that's kind of an identifying a characteristic of a person, right? So Lionel Messi es argentino. Claudia Sheinbaum es mexicana. Sofía Vergara es colombiana. Zidane is francés. So notice francés. Not every Not every adjective is going to end in an a. If it ends in an a, right, we don't know what we don't have to make a distinction for gender. In any case, again, same with estadounidense, right? So Dolores Huerta is estadounidense. We don't. There's no gender involved there. We don't have to say estadounidense or estadounidenso. It just ends in a, right? And you could also call her norteamericana. In that case, norteamericana if it's a woman, norteamericano if it's a man, norteamericanas, norteamericanos. Right? Okay, good. Nationality. Characteristics and identity, right? Ella es muy inteligente, right? So again, this isn't just like a passing state where she's being smart right now, right? Or dedicated right now. She is a dedicated, intelligent person, and that's a characteristic of her, and that's why we're going to use ser. Ella es muy inteligente. Ese es un pájaro, right? That's just a statement of fact. That's what it is. It's a bird. Es un quetzal. That's the national bird of Guatemala. Yes, it is a real bird, even though it looks kind of imaginary. Looks a little bit like a Pokemon. Y el pájaro es bonito. Again, it's always pretty, right? That's just a characteristic of it. Even if this was an ugly quetzal, we would just say, oh, es bonito. Okay. Somos amigos, right? We're friends. That's a characteristic of all of us as a group. Alyssa Liu es atlética, right? She's very athletic. Y los plátanos son amarillos, right? And that's a characteristic as well, right? Even you might even think of it, even these green ones over here are kind of in the end yellow, but well, maybe not. I don't know. You tell me what defines a banana. Time is always going to be ser. Es la 1:15, right? So it's 1:15. La 1:15. Notice since it's only one, this is going to be singular, but when it's 3 o'clock, it's going to be plural. Son las 3 menos 5, right? It's 5. It's 3 o'clock minus 5 minutes, so it's 5 minutes to 3. And also days, es el 17 de julio, right, the 17th of July, o años, es el año 1776, right, 1776, the year our Declaration of Independence was signed here in the United States. Okay, so that should basically do it for ser and estar, right? So we're talking about characteristics of a person or of a thing that are definitional, right? That aren't transitory in any short-term sense, right? Although things can change over time. I hope you like this picture. This is a painting by Rufino Tamayo. He's a Mexican painter and was really well known for mixing up different textures and colors and prints and things like that. I think it's really pretty and evocative. If it's not necessarily representative as we might expect a photo to be. In terms of what you should be doing to practice this, you should look at the a conversar actividades, so activities 14 and 15 in the book, and you should work on that briefly with your classmate. All right, any questions? You know how to get in touch with me, Hughes at csusm.edu, or you can message me through the Canvas site. Right, adios.